The Black Swan, The Impact of the Highly Improbable is a 2007 book by scholar and former trader Nassim Nicholas Taleb offering insights on handling rare and unpredictable events. Drawing on philosophy, historical analysis, and probability theory, Taleb discusses the outsized role that unexpected Black Swan events play in shaping history, markets, and lives. Chapter 1: What is a Black Swan? The author opens by describing a Black Swan event. Black swans are a metaphor for high-profile, hard to predict, and rare events that have extreme impacts. The name comes from how Europeans had only ever seen white swans, so the sighting of a black swan in Australia came as a major shock and overturned their assumptions. Likewise, major historic events that shape societies, technologies, or markets can come as complete surprises yet change everything once they occur. Taleb argues that black swans underlie almost everything about our world, from how technology and business operate to the rise and fall of political movements. Yet we rarely account for them properly when making predictions or judgments about the world. We are biased to think the future will function as a simple continuation of the past, failing to forecast discontinuities. Even experts in a field routinely fail to predict high-impact events and trends within their own expertise. When a major, unexpected event does come along, we tend to rationalize it after the fact rather than admit it was unpredictable. Our minds automatically craft neat narratives, finding ways to explain the event as if it was foreseeable, a psychological bias called hindsight bias. In reality, the event depended on complex interactions and luck coming together in an improbable mix. Yet explaining it after the fact gives us an illusion of understanding and control. Taleb argues we must acknowledge the role of black swans and our limits in predicting them if we want to be accurate. We tend to ignore the possibility of black swans in our daily lives, business thinking, and broader beliefs, yet that makes us fragile to disruption. We must adjust our decision-making to properly account for black swans instead. We should favor flexibility, redundancies, decentralization, and the integrity to admit what we cannot know or control. With the right framework, black swans can be opportunities rather than just threats. The author then analyzes features that make black swans so distinct and important. For one, they lie far outside the realm of regular expectations, making them true unknowns. Their extreme rarity also means black swans have an outsized share of influence in shaping history and systems, as rare major events can shift trajectories far more than the common incremental happenings that dominate daily life. Most historic changes in politics, technology, culture, and more can be traced back to improbable singular events or inventions, yet we ignore this. Additionally, black swans have extreme impacts when they happen. They are not merely curiosities but reshape systems massively. As extreme outliers by definition, their immediate influence can be orders of magnitude beyond marginal changes. This means black swans inevitably shape the world far more than typical days, granting them an importance belied by their improbability. Finally, Taleb notes how human nature makes black swans especially hard to handle. We have an innate desire to avoid uncertainty and create explanations, leading us to whitewash the past into a simpler narrative. We craft stories to fit randomness into neat schemas, telling ourselves the world is understandable and predictable. The author closes by noting how getting the right framework to handle black swans can make them promising rather than just perilous. Those prepared for disruption can capitalize when disruption comes. Chapter 2: Scalability, Mediocristan and Extremistan. The author opens Chapter 2 by distinguishing between two domains that structure the world, Mediocristan and Extremistan. Mediocristan refers to areas where outcomes are more scalable, predictable, and less prone to extreme shocks or discontinuities. Here, common intuition and basic statistics can often work. As an example, variables like a person's weight or height follow Mediocristan dynamics. There is little risk of someone suddenly developing to over 30 feet tall or dropping to 10 pounds overnight. Likewise, most human attributes have a typical scale. In contrast, Extremistan refers to systems where results are less predictable and scalable, with a higher chance of extreme outliers emerging. Variables like a person's wealth, book sales, or technology influence operate in Extremistan. Here a single author, company, or invention can reshape an entire domain and there is less predictable continuity. The role of luck and positive feedback loops is higher. Extremistan will always have uneven concentrations of success whether looking across wealth, book sales, website traffic, or other unevenly distributed metrics. Taleb uses the metaphor, "It is easier to become the world's richest person than it is to have the highest IQ," to explain Extremistan's unpredictability. In Mediocristan systems there is regression to the mean and results cluster around typical values. But in Extremistan, small differences in skill, luck, or initial traction can scale up exponentially, taking systems far away from averages. What matters most is not typical performance but exposure to positive black swans that can reshape trajectories overnight. When analyzing a system, it is crucial we recognize which domain it operates in, as this determines forecast reliability. In Mediocristan, basic statistical predictions tend to be more accurate. But in Extremistan, statistics derived from past observations will fail to account for potential radical discontinuities. Policies and approaches need to be robust to negative black swans yet able to ride positive ones. Simply projecting past patterns into the future is perilous. Much of the modern world has shifted more into Extremistan dynamics even as forecasters rely on tools better suited to Mediocristan. Fields like public health and infrastructure planning need to better account for unpredictable pandemics, financial crises, tech shifts, and similar radical events. Fragility to black swans is increasing even as our modeling is not keeping pace. Operators in business, government, and other areas need what Taleb calls a black swan robust approach rather than models relying on backtesting and overconfidence in stale statistics. The author closes the chapter by analyzing more implications of Mediocristan versus Extremistan systems. Key is tailoring reasoning style and predictions to a domain's characteristics. We need probabilistic and statistical rigor in Mediocristan areas yet skeptical empiricism focused on falsification and stress testing in Extremistan domains. Mistaking which mode a system is in is a recipe for being blindsided by events lying outside model expectations but carrying extreme significance. Chapter 3, Don't Be a Turkey, It Pays to Be a Skeptic. This chapter explains the turkey problem many face when reasoning about the world. Just as turkeys fed by humans daily have no framework to expect the abrupt surprise of being slaughtered for Thanksgiving dinner, we are often turkeys in business, politics, technology, and life by not accounting for black swans. We falsely assume continuity of the environment based on past experience, when discontinuities carrying catastrophic or wonderful surprise can emerge suddenly. Taleb uses the turkey story as a metaphor illustrating several key reasons we fail to expect or handle black swans well. 1. We rely too much on inductive reasoning, deriving universal rules from past observations. Seeing the sun rise daily, we expect it will always do so. Yet black swans by definition lie outside the realm of previous experience. No amount of projecting historical data prepares you for unprecedented shocks. 2. We fail to appreciate the dominance of black swans in shaping systems and history. Rare major events are responsible for most true shifts in business, wealth, technology, culture, and more. But most days resemble others, blinding us to the outsized influence of outliers. 3. We ignore our reliance on environmental stability and instead see skill as the sole variable determining outcomes. Turkeys naturally see the farmer's reliable daily feedings as proof of their skill rather than luck of environment. Likewise, stability allows people to overestimate personal contributions to success while underappreciating the role environments play until collapse. 4. We fail to differentiate domains of Mediocristan, scalable regularity, versus Extremistan, irregular black swan dominance. Without adjusting reasoning modes, we expect inappropriate levels of continuity. The author argues that while inductive reasoning is natural, we must embrace deductive skeptical reasoning to properly deal with black swans. This means actively looking for falsification, stress testing our ideas, developing a library of black swan preparations, and staying empirically minded rather than clinging to assumptions or narratives. We must act as our own devil's advocate. Taleb closes noting it is hard but essential work to avoid becoming a turkey. Hubris from stability blinds us until the abrupt revision of collapse. We must cultivate an empirical and skeptical mindset, divorcing beliefs from ego and identity. But the payoff is avoiding fragility and better navigating black swans when they emerge. The chapter offers principles on how to avoid the turkey problem moving forward. Chapter 4, The Scandal of Prediction. This chapter focuses on society's reliance on faulty predictive models and the scandal of how poorly experts and forecasters actually perform when tested for accuracy over long horizons. Despite near-ubiquitous failure to predict black swans and pivotal events, the author notes we still turn to predictive pundits for understanding events after the fact. Taleb discusses structural reasons long-term predictive accuracy is so mediocre across fields like economics, politics, technology forecasting and more. First is the very nature of black swans, rare and irregular by definition, they lie outside the data sets and relationships models are based on. So extrapolating historically derived relationships into the future fails when faced with true novelty. Expert judgment fails for similar reasons. Actual domain expertise, while useful for within-system analysis, does not help predict system dislocations from exogenous black swans. Yet we still turn to subject matter experts for event prediction. Second, psychology biases further undermine expert accuracy but without denting reputations. Experts face no accountability for failed long-term predictions but still claim credit after events for anything they got vaguely right. The press also rarely revisits old forecasts to gauge accuracy but simply offers platforms to the same experts post facto. There is little downside for being wrong. Similarly, hedge fund managers collect performance fees on short-term volatility while avoiding accountability for long-term results. Third, the author notes how we conflate two very different skills, within-system expertise and long-term event prediction. The former relies on pattern recognition while the latter requires deductive reasoning geared for spotting anomalies. Few develop real skills in assessing probabilities and falsifying models rather than demonstrating erudition. Confusing domain knowledge with prophecy, we expect unrealistic predictive capacities from experts. The author argues more rigor in scorekeeping long-term accuracy could help address structural failings. The author closes arguing that we urgently need to apply more skepticism before turning to predictive experts and models for guidance. Their post facto rationalizations may offer some insights but little meaningful predictive accuracy. With prediction so poor at assessing discontinuities but still relied upon, we face an ongoing scandal that leaves society fragile to disruption. We must temper our expectations of forecasters while developing our own skepticism and empiricism. This can help us avoid becoming overconfident turkeys before potential black swans emerge. The main structural reasons for poor long-term predictive accuracy across fields like economics, politics, and technology forecasting include 1. The unpredictability of black swan events. Rare and irregular by nature, genuine black swans cannot be derived from historical data sets or relationships that models rely on. So the core assumptions underlying most predictions fail when true novelty emerges. 2. Psychological biases that undermine expert accountability. Experts face little accountability or scorekeeping for inaccurate long-term forecasts. They claim credit for anything vaguely accurate after the fact while ignoring bad predictions. This reduces the incentive to improve modeling. There is also a bias to conflate subject expertise with prophetic abilities. 3. A mismatch of skills. Making accurate point predictions over long time frames requires probabilistic and falsification skills to stress test assumptions. But most experts gain status through demonstrating domain knowledge rather than developing deductive, empirical forecasting abilities. This leads to overconfident but fragile predictions. 4. A lack of model falsification. Few experts apply rigor in empirically falsifying models rather than just developing complex analytics that rely on backtesting unstable historical relationships. But black swans by definition lie outside historically derived patterns. So models fail to estimate the probability or potential impact of dislocations. In summary, the combination of black swan uncertainty, human biases, skill mismatches, and lack of falsification practices structurally undermine expert predictions while failing to dent reputations. This leads to an ongoing scandal where long-term accuracy remains poor but reliance on forecasts stays high across many industries. Chapter 5: Why We Can't Know What We'll Know. This chapter examines the difficulties in predicting future knowledge, both what we may discover scientifically but also how new technologies might reshape business and society. Taleb argues that not only do we fail to predict key events, what we don't know, but we struggle to imagine the implications of breakthroughs still to uncover what we will know. Yet many domains from research funding to entrepreneurship require gazing accurately into the unknown. Taleb discusses why peering deep into the future remains so devilishly hard. For one, discoveries do not arise smoothly but through punctuated equilibrium, long periods of incremental progress occasionally punctuated by sudden paradigm shifts from radical new innovations. But we wrongly expect change to emerge steadily. For example, air transportation advances came not gradually but via waves of disruptive designs like jets and high bypass engines, just as medicine experienced periodic revolutions through germ theory, anesthesia, vaccines, and DNA sequencing. But participants extrapolate prior trends, blind to discontinuities. Secondly, unknown areas we ignore turn out massively consequential, making predictions perilous. Taleb gives the example of physicists failing to predict the laser, semiconductors, or nuclear applications that ultimately drove technology progress and business transformations. Experts miss these completely while overestimating developments in their own domains. What we don't yet see ends up controlling future trajectories. Thirdly, Taleb examines the dominant role of serendipity and accidental discovery in breakthroughs. Rather than smooth, necessity-driven progress, science and technology repeatedly experience accidental, improbable insights unlocking new knowledge, from penicillin to X-rays. Yet we narrate innovation as far more systematic after the fact. Funding schemes and training reinforce perception of orderly step-by-step advancement rather than black swan-dependent leaps. But the commonplace occludes the decisive yet improbable breakthroughs underpinning history. Lastly, the author examines the rapid decline in predictability as forecast horizons expand, the exponential decay of knowledge. While we can anticipate accurately near term, our vision rapidly fades, moving to 5, 10, or 20-plus year predictions. Small early signals get drowned out by mounting variables over time. Errors compound multiplicatively, not linearly. The difference between linear and exponential is much larger than between linear and quadratic. Yet long-range planning still relies linearly on point predictions without accounting for widening uncertainty. Taleb closes arguing more probabilistic empirical approaches are needed rather than seeing the unknown as impossible to engage with. We must widen uncertainty ranges dramatically as horizons expand while avoiding overprecision, or we risk being blindsided by black swans emerging from what we don't know and can't imagine. Yet this remains deeply unnatural given psychology's abhorrence of ambiguity. Embracing uncertainty represents a major but needed shift. Chapter 6: Predicting the Past. This chapter examines society's tendency to whitewash the past into simpler narratives, blinding us to how unpredictable and complex events actually unfolded in real time. When assessing a field like technology, politics, business, or research, we assume continuity and inevitability that did not exist looking forward. Yet failing to account for the true jaggedness of history leaves us unable to assess the contingent role of luck and black swans, which shape most systems. Taleb outlines structural factors causing us to predict the past falsely. 1. Hindsight bias and retrospective distortion. Once cataclysmic events occur, we see them as more predictable than contemporaneous views suggest. Outcomes get rewritten as inevitable rather than deeply unsure. Fear and uncertainty before pivotal moments get erased in historical accounts filtered by ultimate results. 2. Narrative fallacy. Our minds automatically craft coherent narratives linking facts sequentially, even when relationships were less neat. We create false links to reduce complexity while deleting confusing elements that don't fit our need for tidy stories. But real history remains far messier. 3. Silent evidence. Failed or forgotten paths get literally erased from accounts over time. But these represented real options earlier and better reflect true unpredictability looking forward. Lacking access to silent alternatives, the sole result gets imbued with more intentionality. Survivorship bias also causes this distortion. 4. Context loss. With time, context key for understanding uncertainty looking forward fades. Small decisions loom larger devoid of contemporaneous context. We lose access to the cognitive frame of predecessors. Though faced with a range of similarly unclear paths, their frame differs radically from our narrow backward lens. Taleb gives examples like the discovery of the laser. Today seen as having many inevitable applications, contemporaneous documents show bafflement about uses, if any existed. Likewise, the small role accorded to luck versus narratives emphasizing skill, vision, and strategy in entrepreneurial success stories obscures reality. Outcomes breed perception of intention. The author closes by discussing how sanitizing the jaggedness of history breeds fragility in systems not designed to handle irregularity. Unless accounting for black swans and luck, institutions drift based on flawed assumptions of continuity and predictability. Believing past precedent can sufficiently model futures leaves us unprepared for when nonlinear change emerges. Embracing uncertainty and understanding the past helps engage uncertainty going forward. Chapter 7: What to do when you can't predict. The author opens the chapter arguing that prediction should not be the focus when dealing with environments dominated by extremistan dynamics and black swans. Whether in business strategy, public policy, economics, or other domains, false precision is not just inaccurate but dangerous if it prevents developing robustness. Fragility arises when systems presume too much predictability rather than acknowledging deep uncertainty. Even with proper probabilistic humility, Taleb argues developing resilience requires avoiding predictions altogether in the most unstable systems. He outlines key steps to take when acknowledging intrinsic limits to prediction in a domain. 1. Construct robustness to disruption rather than making plans reliant on point forecasts. This means emphasizing decentralization to contain shocks, redundancy to overcome failures, flexibility to change approaches, optionality to capitalize on good black swans, and anti-fragility to actually gain from volatility. Systems should distribute rather than concentrate decision authority and resources. 2. When possible, shift activities to areas governed by Mediocristan rather than Extremistan rules. In scalable domains with fewer black swans, plan based on actuarial data and measurements. But in uneven domains, robustness should dominate over predictive plans. 3. Make predictions empirically falsifiable rather than clinging to narratives. Condition beliefs on failure modes identified upfront so you can decisively abandon assumptions that may appear reasonable but crumble on contact with reality. Build an inventory of things that would invalidate your ideas. 4. Practice skepticism over prognostication. Spend less time forecasting and more trying to disprove your own theories. Make this falsification a lifelong practice rather than something attempted occasionally. Ensure your mental habits align with the challenges of your environment. 5. Increase feedback loops dramatically to catch errors early before they compound. Error compounding expands exponentially over time. But rapid feedback allows mistakes to be small hiccups rather than catastrophic. It also builds empirical skills in changing conditions. 6. Develop resilience to your own ignorance and uncertainty rather than masking angst via false confidence. The mental discomfort of uncertainty should not be avoided but managed as an input for improving robustness. Transmuting unease into action is key. The author closes by arguing that accepting unpredictability takes courage but allows capitalizing on uncertainty. We must recognize the limits of knowledge while making ourselves anti-fragile to disruption. By focusing less on predicting exact events and more on cultivating resilience, black swans can be welcomed rather than existential threats.